happen if someone had leprosy under the law of Moses? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Leviticus on walking through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Leviticus chapter 13. We're going to be reading from verses 9 to 17. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Leviticus chapter 13, beginning at verse 9. When the leprous sore is on a person, then he shall be brought to the priest, and the priest shall examine him. And indeed, if the swelling is on the skin is white, and it has turned the hair white, and there is a spot of raw flesh in the swelling, it is an old leprosy on the skin of his body. The priest shall pronounce him unclean, and shall not isolate him, for he is unclean. And if leprosy breaks out all over the skin, and the leprosy covers all the skin of the one who has the sore from his head to his foot, wherever the priest looks, then the priest shall consider, and indeed, if the leprosy has covered all his body, he shall pronounce him clean who has the sore. It has turned all white, he is clean. But when raw flesh appears on him, he shall be unclean. And the priest shall examine the raw flesh and pronounce him to be unclean, for the raw flesh is unclean, it is leprosy. Or if the raw flesh changes and turns white again, he shall come to the priest, and the priest shall examine him. And indeed, if the sore is turned white, then the priest shall pronounce him clean who has the sore, he is clean. We're in the third section of Leviticus, talking about uncleanness under the law of Moses and its removal. In chapter 11, we talked about clean and unclean meats, and how if one became defiled by them, they were unclean until evening and had to wash themselves and their clothes. In chapter 12, we talked about how a woman is unclean after childbirth due to the shedding of blood that occurred during the process. The time of uncleanness differed based on the gender of the child. 7 days for a male with a 33-day additional purification time period, and 14 days for a female with a 66-day additional purification time period. We noted that the woman had not sinned by having a child. It's just the shedding of blood caused one to be unclean, and God determined how long one would remain such. Coming to chapters 13 and 14, we are discussing uncleanness that comes from having leprosy. The leprosy talked about here is much more broad than the term today, for it includes all sorts of skin ailments. In our last episode, we talked about what one would do if they suspected they had leprosy. They were to go to the priest for an examination, at which point he would either immediately pronounce him unclean, if it was obvious of a leprous sore, or he would isolate the person for 7 to 14 days before making a determination, if the skin condition was not conclusive to the eye. If after this period of isolation the skin condition healed, he would be pronounced clean, although would have to return if the skin condition returned. Otherwise, he was unclean. Coming now to verse 9, we again come to someone who has a leprous sore, but unlike earlier, where the matter may have been in doubt, here there is really no doubt. If there was a swelling in the skin that is white, if it has turned the hair white and there is a spot of raw flesh in the swelling, then it is leprosy. The person is not isolated until later for the priest to determine. He would determine it right then and there. The person is unclean. Due to the fact that there was raw skin, which anyone who has had a severe burn or cut know can become infected, so the spread of diseases was most likely the reason that this person would be considered unclean. It again was not a matter of sin, for having a skin ailment is not sinful. It is a matter of holiness before God, for all who approached him under the law of Moses must be considered clean, which in this case means that they would not likely be able to spread disease. However, if the leprosy covers his entire body from his head to his foot, causing him to be white, then the priest would look at him and he would be considered clean. Now this might seem counterintuitive to us, for why would a small sore cause you to be unclean, but the disease covering your entire body allow you to be clean? It again likely has to do with the possibility of infecting other people. The flesh here is not raw, the skin is dry, and thus the disease can no longer be considered contagious. In such a state, since there's otherwise nothing wrong with the person, the priest would pronounce them clean. What was to happen to the person who had the open sore, who was pronounced unclean, but later had the skin turned white? He would return to the priest for examination, and the priest would pronounce him clean. Why? Because like the person who had the disease all over their body, having the sore now closed and a white leprosy covering it, meant that someone was no longer a threat to spread it to someone else. Therefore, they were able to be pronounced clean. God would not pronounce someone unclean forever, only when it was completely necessary. In the next episode, we'll talk about what would happen if someone has a boil or a burn that produced a sore. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Leviticus chapter 13, verses 18 to 28, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
I'm not ashamed.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his cross.